Hello and welcome to today's 10-minute episode of The Listening Lounge. My name is Nick Day, CEO of JGA Recruitment Group, specialist payroll and HR recruiters. Welcome, Darren Richards, Senior Customer Success Manager at StaffCircle. Before we jump into the world of customer success, this is something that you're going to see from a slightly different angle. So what does the word payroll mean to you?
Interesting point, and I guess the best example I can give is, let's go back before 12 years ago. Payroll wasn't a word I was familiar with. I was like probably 99% of the UK, I got paid. I didn't check a pay slip. I didn't worry about my pay. I got paid on time, and that's all that mattered. It was only when I started my career that I actually started realizing, how significant a function payroll is. Fundamentally, it's the basis of any business, from the engagements and the customer experiences I've seen over my time. It's one of those functions that's assumed is always going to be there. It always produces payroll accurately, it produces it timely, and it's taken as a given. So my adoption into the world of payroll was quite significant. I spent the first 6 months learning about payroll, and coming from the position of zero, it was massive. I equate payroll to nuclear physics in some instances because the people who do payroll, they're constantly changing the environment. It changes, almost twice a year. And the legislation, what I learned in 6 months barely scratched the surface. So my introduction to payroll was significant, and I was supporting payroll. So coming from that position where I looked at pay slip probably once in a lifetime, and it was only when I didn't get a salary increase that I noticed actually I've been missing a salary increase for 6 months. So that was my adoption into payroll. But I think fundamentally it is, it's probably the most significant part of any business, because if you don't pay your employees, you don't have employees.
No, couldn't agree more. I think you're not alone either, Darren, in thinking that actually payroll comes to the fore when you find there's something wrong with the pay slip, if you're from the employee perspective. And therefore, if it's going well, it actually means your payroll department's doing a fantastic job. So to bring this new payroll pathway to life then, tell us a little bit more about what exactly customer success is, because for those not familiar, I know this is absolutely true, particularly post-pandemic, as a recruiter, we've secured more payroll customer success based roles than we ever have done before. So it's definitely been a real meteoric rise post-pandemic in this field. I know it's existed before because you've got 12 years track record in that space, but for the world of payroll, bring it to life for us. What does it mean?
Sure, and it's an interesting question fundamentally, because customer success, the term is relatively new. However, the function, I will say, has been around for quite a number of years because I've done it. Historically, it's been known as a service delivery manager or even an account manager, where we were effectively a one-stop shop for our customers, our payroll customers in particular, with a focus on the operational side. So fundamentally, the payroll managed service in particular, supporting the payroll managed service team. And it's after the sales process has been complete and after the customer is implemented. So we support the payroll teams. We're effectively the voice of the customer in the business. So we facilitate all the customer-facing engagements, whether that's reviews, change management, legislation compliance and updates, and training and issue escalation. And as you say, Nick, the one thing about payroll, payroll's going great when there's no problems reported.
Absolutely right. Yeah.
But we know the reality. As much as we try, payroll does occasionally go wrong, but we do have service reviews, we have KPIs which measure that for our customers, and that's where the service delivery manager historically managed that relationship, and we were the face and the voice to that customer. I think for me, it's interesting. I've seen a clear separation between what is classed as sort of sales-based account management versus the operational support after go live. And that for me is where the rise of customer success has fundamentally come in, because businesses are now focusing on the retention aspects of your customer base. And I think as CSMs, ultimately, we're here to support the customers to achieve their success. It's all about what they've desired in terms of outcome, while they're using the payroll products and service. And customer success is relationship focused, and that's the key bit. It's not a sales role, it's not an implementation role. It's about maintaining that customer relationship, because fundamentally, they have a managed payroll service, but they're processing the payroll. That's where their focus is. So what's historically the service delivery role was to manage that relationship with the customer, so that if there were any issues or there were reviews that were contracted, that's where we would step in and support the payroll teams. Obviously heavily relying on what the payroll teams produced and working closely with them, but fundamentally managing that relationship, making sure the customer achieves their goals during that contracted term. Because let's be honest, payroll teams, and customers, they still have goals they need to achieve over a period. And there's also that continuous improvement aspect. It's the one thing we see on LinkedIn every day, which is, the fact that we do what we do because we've always done it that way.
Yeah.
And it's about challenging that, because as I said earlier, payroll is a constantly changing environment, and there's not many environments where you have to make changes, at least once a year, potentially twice a year, depending on, the climate. And let's be honest, given the change we've gone through in payroll as a result of COVID, there have been some significant changes that have had to be implemented extremely quickly.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. I have to say, for those who haven't seen our website, there's the famous saying, of course, by Einstein, which we're doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result as the first sign of madness, right? And I guess we have that approach as a recruiter. Like, people have an idea of what recruitment is, but for me, every recruitment agency operates very, very differently. And the way that we do things, I think, is probably aligned with the way that you talked about it there. My next question was going to be about how has it really evolved? But I think you've answered part of that. But it sounded like the role of customer success that used to be that service providers and recruiters and sales teams are very much focused on attracting new clients all the time. You're constantly on that hamster wheel. And actually, there's been a slight change in thought that actually it's equally, if not more important, that we retain our existing customers and we look after what we've already got before we jump headfirst into finding new ones. And I think that's where there's been a real shift. There's certainly been a shift from an HR perspective for brands trying to, they're really focused on well-being and the retention of their top talent rather than always trying to find new talent. And it sounds like that's been a shift that's we're now finding that relevant in the world of customer success as well. I'm a payroll manager. I'm listening to this, and maybe I've got it in-house, and I'm going to go out. I'm going to outsource my payroll or whatever it might be. I'm going to use a service provider. What are the key things you would say to the individual about, if I'm on the fence, not quite sure what to do, and you went, well, if you do this, these are the core 5 ways, 15 ways, whatever it might be, that we would support you as a payroll professional? What would those key things typically be?
Well, I guess the biggest benefit when you're looking at using a payroll provider is fundamentally it's going to give you time back. So that's that time that you're processing the payroll, where you can look to develop those strategic plans. What is it you're looking to achieve? Just because we do payroll doesn't mean we stand still. We're constantly changing, we're constantly evolving. If you talk about the payroll landscape, let's be honest, that's changed rapidly, probably over the course of
massively
2 to 3 years. Real-time payroll calculations.
Yeah.
Who'd have thought of that? 3 hours to process, calculate a payroll of 10,000 employees. God. And, potentially the idea of on-demand pay. That's massively radical. During my time in payroll, I saw, the move to real-time information and pension auto-enrollment in the same year. Not necessarily the best idea by HMRC.
I remember that as well.
Yeah, that was a fun year. And that they were considered landmarks, but in the space of the last 2 years, well, I'd say 2 to 3 years, we're looking at some additional fundamental shifts, which I think, people need to understand and consider. I think the idea of real-time pay is massive. I think that could really shake up the landscape. So customers need to be thinking about this. And when we talk about employee well-being, financial well-being is one of those things. And the idea of, the on-demand pay is to support people through what are going to be potentially hard times, or have been hard times, let's be honest. So I think the biggest benefit of, using a payroll provider or a payroll service is it gives you that time back to devote, to your strategic plans, what you want to achieve. And fundamentally, there's some major players out there that, have excellent track records, innovative products. When I started in payroll, they were using a DOS-based system.
Yeah.
It was great. It did what it said on the tin. But the next iteration was obviously a Windows-based system. Then you've now got a web-based system, but you're on web version 3.0 now with the advanced cloud-based systems. Let's be honest, mobile, doing payroll on a mobile phone, who'd have thought?
We're getting paid in the metaverse at some point, Darren, I'm sure.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's all going to change. So, this is an exciting time, and it's going to be a time of high change, and people need to be aware of that and be able to position themselves accordingly to consider this, because as you mentioned earlier, it's about retaining employees, and the best way to retain employees is make sure you get them paid on time.
Thank you to all of my listeners, and a huge thank you to Darren. It's been a great show.
Thank you. And to all those customer success managers out there, you're doing a great job.
Fantastic. Thanks, Darren.